Hi, I'm Ben,
And I'm Josh.
and this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 35.
Episode 35. Ben, 35 is an important number because I can think off the top of my head, not really, but there are 3 events in history that happened on 35 years that are just so critical that I have to bring them up now. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Why is the number 35 important?
In 1735, there was a cornerstone court case in the U.S. They were still colonies back then, where the New York Weekly Journal had a writer named John Peter Zenger. He was acquitted of seditious libel against the royal governor of New York, based on the fact that what he wrote was true. But this was a cornerstone case that is still quoted today as being vital for ensuring freedom of the press.
We cite a case from 1735. Before that, if you were the governor and someone wrote something about you that was true and you didn't like it, you just sued him for libel and then you won?
Yeah, exactly. You just lock him up because you were the governor.
Wow.
So, 1735.
Good for John Peter Zenger.
Yeah, super important for freedom of the press. In 1835 was the only year in U.S. history that the public debt, the U.S. national debt, was $0. Wow. President Andrew Jackson, who was from the same political party as Jefferson, for everybody that's watched Hamilton, they hated the credit system that Hamilton had come up with, were consolidating the state's debts at the national level. And Andrew Jackson made it a mission to pay off the public debt based a lot on... Well, he had a lot of personal issues where he had bad debt problems when he was a younger man. And so
I had a bad experience.
It's just in his head, debt is bad. And so they paid it off. Yay, go America. It lasted 1 year.
Then World War I kicked off and we needed to buy some tanks.
Civil War kicked off. We needed to buy muskets, apparently.
1835.
1835. And then they started paying it down, and we got really close to paying off again until World War I, which is what you were saying. And then, yes, we needed to buy tanks.
Okay.
And now the third super critical thing that happened in 1935, very important year, because in 1935, the very first canned beer was ever sold. Before that, it was all in bottles. And like putting it in cans made it more accessible to just Joe Blow American. It was a glorious year.
Wait, why? Why is a can more accessible than a bottle?
I made that up. I'm sure I'm sure more cans of beer are sold than bottles of beer. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe the trend is swinging the other way. I do prefer bottles now, but I started as a can guy.
It doesn't go very well as it does in the favorite song of Children Everywhere. You know the one.
Do I? I don't know if I do.
I never drank a drop in my life, but I still know how to sing 99 bottles of beer on the wall.
99 cans of beer on the wall doesn't sound quite right.
Just not the same.
I've never understood how they got onto the wall or why they were falling. Like the whole song.
Have you ever sang the song and made it to 0?
I think the farthest I made it was to 40 once, but then I don't know. I think somebody hit me until I went unconscious.
All right. Well, thank you for telling us why the number 35 is important. I believe you also need to issue a correction from last time.
I do have a correction. And what's funny is that I might be the only listener or the only person involved in this podcast that recognizes this as a mistake. But
all right. Hang on. I recognized it at the time you said it, but I also have this calculation that happens real fast. You're like, is it important for me to challenge Josh on this right now?
Man, I wish you had, because you had such great ammunition. In the last episode, we were talking about Iron Man villains, and one of them I said was the Merovingian, which is ridiculous.
He's from the Matrix.
He's from the Matrix movies. I said it twice. He's the French guy in the Matrix movie. No, what I meant was the Mandarin, who is Iron Man's arch nemesis in all the comic books, a great character, and I screwed it up. And in that episode, I went all comic book snobby earlier than that, talking about the Civil War. And then I go and misquote Iron Man's nemesis. It would have been a great
opportunity for me to humiliate you.
So we need to update the score, too. If you recall, at the end of that episode, it was Josh 2, Ben 0. Yes, it should have been 2-1. So let the records show that 2-0 has an asterisk.
Okay. Awesome. Well, while we're issuing corrections, I wanted to do a little bit of post-mortem on the Bad at Magic Fitness Challenge. Any longtime listener of the podcast know that we kind of, in fits and starts, try to establish a community accountability system for getting more fit. I think we started, I don't know, back in January or February or something like that, and using some Army calculation for your like fat and fitness level, we were tracking it over time so that we could look at it and see who was doing well and stuff like that. And we intended to end about this time.
Did we? I thought we had intended to end in like August or something.
Yeah, yes. I noticed you took it down off the website.
I did. Nobody was using it.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's talk about that. So why do you think no one was using it?
Just like every fitness thing that happens, like you're really strongly motivated at first, and then like if you don't have the external motivation factors to keep you going, it just falls to pieces.
Okay, I acknowledge what you just said, and I think it's wrong.
Oh, well, refute what I just said, please. The floor is yours.
Okay, so would you say that you are more or less fit than when we started the Bad at Magic Fitness Challenge?
I personally believe I am more fit now.
As am I. So obviously it wasn't out of a lack of motivation to become fitter. So I don't think your theory on why it failed stands up. Present another.
Well, the theory, like for you and I continue to be fit. Like we both kind of fell off the wagon there in middle of summer, I believe, which is right about the time it was supposed to end, and we just kind of quit updating it.
Yeah, we were putting on our COVID-10. But I turned out to be a prophet, and it obviously is a self-fulfilling prophecy that I said when we started this thing, I'm not good at just getting fit when I'm still at home with my family in a normal situation. But when I deploy, man, I can put the pedal to the metal.
Yes, and being deployed all the way in the horrible, deserted, barren wasteland that is Florida.
Yeah.
It seems like that it's easy to keep up on your fitness.
So since I got here on the 14th of October, Josh, I've lost 28 pounds.
All right, so my first initial reaction has been, good job, buddy. That is awesome that you can pull up that kind of motivation. My second reaction is, good Lord, how much baby fat did you have just ready to be shed in a week?
I definitely put on the COVID-10, but I do this the hard way when I do it. I mean, like, I am really going after it hardcore to lose the weight.
Now, I got to tell you, Ben, dieting and fitness like this is not about fits and starts. It's about long-term commitment and change in your behavior patterns to make it a consistent thing.
If my life was a scatter plot, it would be like a roller coaster that gets higher over time. You know, it has this average trending upward, but every 4 years when I deploy, it takes a huge drop off and then climbs back up even higher than it was the time before.
Ooh, so that makes for a fun ride that will kill you and your heart someday, you old man. But now the real question becomes, the Air Force is not an indefinite thing, and there's an end date on when you're going to be at your last deployment.
Yeah, and this week, the Air Force announced that they're officially ending, not just putting an exemption on for the sake of COVID, using waist measurement as part of the fitness composition test.
That's good, because that was a complete fraud, a complete waste of everyone's time and effort.
It was.
I could,
especially for you. You're big boned. I'm 5'9".
I'm not big boned. I'm just a huge guy. And
right.
I almost maxed the fitness test every time, except for the waist measurement, which I would almost fail. Not because I'm hugely grossly
even when
overweight.
you were fit. Yeah, dumb. It was dumb the way it was implemented. Instead of trying to fix it again, they're just doing away with it.
Anybody that has a waist over 36 inches obviously cannot be in shape with the Air Force.
Well, we're lucky in the Air Force that we don't do the kinds of things the Army and the Marine Corps do, where in their annual performance evaluation, they also have to submit a photo of them in uniform that is scrutinized by their leadership for how they look in their uniform.
I don't think that's right either.
I don't think that's right. Yeah.
That's that's politicizing like your upper leadership a lot. Not to mention gender bias and racial bias and everything
all
get
that.
Introduced.
Yes, all of that. You know, there was a great chapter in Malcolm Gladwell's, I think, Outliers, about how when the New York Symphony introduced blind auditions, it equalized the composition of the orchestra. But before that time, the people that would listen to the auditions defended their choices and saying that they weren't racist and they weren't sexist. Men just have a better sound. But as soon as they started having people audition from behind a screen where you couldn't see them, then it evened out the composition racially and gender-wise of the orchestra.
Yeah, defend that, you racists.
Yeah. People want to say they aren't. Okay, but back to my original question. So the Bad at Magic Fitness Challenge
we drifted far afield on that one.
Was this website we had to log into, give our identity, have a password associated with it just to protect it, and I don't know, keep out bots, and then put in 3 measurements for men, 2 for women, or
all the way around.
2
for men, 3 for women.
Okay. My theory is it was just too much overhead. Like, I couldn't complete the measurements without my wife being there. So I needed to be in the presence of my wife with the measuring tape on hand at a time when I was also able to log into a computer. And all those little barriers to entry just added up so that I wasn't able to do it.
I get that. And the reason we went with the body fat calculation thing is that is something that I had from previous years. I had the code on the website basically built from years and years ago when we used to use it in my own personal family. And we did that as a way to kind of remove size and gender bias. Because like you, Mr. Roller Coaster of Fitness, if we did it just based sheerly off of weight, if I had worked my fingers to the bone and like really dedicated myself to fitness and lost 10 pounds, I'd have been completely annihilated by you who lost 28, regardless of what our different fitness levels were.
As a percentage of my overall weight, because I'm 5'9" and you're what, 6'4"?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, okay, so here's what I wrote. The Bad at Magic Fitness Challenge is dead. Long live the Bad at Magic Fitness Challenge. And the reason I say that is this week alone, you and I exchanged, 5 text messages where we're just like, dude, check it out. I ran a 5 mile and I averaged 8:48 or whatever, stuff like that.
I want listeners, I want this on the record. He's quoting my times. Ben didn't run that. I ran that.
Yeah, it was awesome. I didn't want to one-up you and send you what my next time was.
Was it pretty good? What was your time after that?
It was good. I'll have to look it up in a second. I did a 10K tonight, and I was running kind of slow. I was running 9:30s. But the thing is, we're not motivated to be fit. And we do desire the thing we were going for with the Bad at Magic Fitness Challenge, which is a little bit of accountability, some encouragement, some tracking, those kinds of things. And this is where I think technology, I'm trying to generalize the lesson of what we intended to do versus what actually happened. And that is, when you're trying to modify someone's behavior, it's important that you recognize that there's a goal and there's some facilitation that needs to take place, but you also need to put it together in a way that's accessible. Like right now in my bathroom, I have this Bluetooth scale. It's ultra simple. All I do is pull it out from underneath the counter and step on it, and it automatically sends my current weight to my phone. Like that's it. That's all I got to do. That is so much easier than the taping my neck and waist kind of thing.
All I can think about right now is Marty McFly in the diner in the future. You mean you got to use your hands? That's like a baby's toy. It's like at what point do we stop making any effort? Like you're going to put in the effort to go run a 10K at 9 30-minute miles, but wrapping that flexible measuring tape around your neck in the mirror, that's just a step too far.
I get that you're giving me a hard time about this, but there's something different about that. Because it wasn't just that. It also required me to have access to my computer to write down the measurements and to have my wife to help me with the measurements.
Man, you're sounding like that guy that goes around the parking lot 2 or 3 times to get as close as he can get to park at the gym.
Okay, but there's a guy I work with that's going to run 40 miles for his 40th birthday, and he comes in an hour before me so he can get a good parking spot. I'm like, dude, do you not see the hypocrisy here? Like you want to run 40 miles and you don't want to walk an extra 20 feet.
I refuse walking that extra 20 yards. That is ridiculous. Yeah, that always blows me away.
So, but the point I'm trying to make here is the same kind of thing that like app developers and people. I like that you've exhibited this attitude of that's easy. Why can't people just do the extra thing? You could apply this to anything. You could apply this to like government food stamp program or the DMV or grocery store checkouts. Those little tiny things that make something easier and more accessible can have this huge magnitude of difference in the result of people doing something.
I get that. And you're talking again kind of about incentives and things. Like if the lower the barrier to entry is, the easier it will be to get participation into the thing. I get that. But there are some situations, like we've identified with the parking as close as you can to the building, where extra effort is simply required. Fitness is one of those things that you just have to put in extra effort.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is you can't compare the extra effort it takes to put in the waist measurements to the extra effort it takes to go for a run. Like obviously one's not strenuous at all, and yet there's still some kind of cognitive barrier that exists that prevents you from doing that. Doesn't.
It's some weird kind of laziness. It's like, I'm going to go run 10 miles. But I just cannot bring myself to spend this extra 2 minutes tracking it appropriately.
Right. Yeah. So that's the thing. What you and I have been using when we were comparing this is an app. And you and I both have different apps, but the apps are convenient for us. Like with 2 or 3 taps of our phone, it brings it up. It utilizes global positioning or whatever to determine our location. Does yours track your heart rate?
It would if I had a heart rate monitor or if
same.
I cared.
Okay, and I don't, and then it archives it, and it. You said you had never been in it before, but when I started asking you questions about it, you found that it kept a historical archive, and you could see trends over time. You could see your best scores. Like this week, you set one of your top scores of all time. Apparently,
I set my
4 years you've been using this.
This is all true.
Yeah, that's all great info, and this is the kind of things that technology can do for our life. So you'd mentioned before with your boss trying to set up a metric that if she tracked that metric and then based incentives on that metric, that it would help increase the kind of performance she wanted to see from her employees.
Right.
I had this experience when I used to work for a company called Convergys that ran a call center where I was doing tech support for Microsoft. I remember the middle managers were probably, sub 30 years old and were just trying their hand at applying the things they learned in their MBA program or whatever. And they were trying to set up an incentive program. Here's what the client wants out of their frontline technicians, and we're training them. So how do we incentivize them to get them to improve in the metrics that the client wants them to improve on? And so they set up this thing where if you were the best performer, you got these tokens that you could trade in and stuff. And bottom line is it didn't have the desired result. And I'll never forget how they called a team meeting and they saw that the program that they set up was having a different result than the one that they intended. And they thought that the correction was to explain to us why we were wrong.
Your behavior is wrong. I know that you're maximizing this to your benefit, but that's incorrect. We actually wanted you to work harder for less money, and here's how you should do that.
Exactly. And I remember sitting there and thinking, this isn't right. What they're trying to do right now by trying to correct the execution of their program because we responded to the incentives in the way that had the most utility for us isn't going to fix it. This isn't going to correct their program. It just points out the fruitlessness of it.
Yes, but they absolutely had to try to correct it because otherwise they would have to go to their next level up middle managers to be like, oh yeah, that huge program that we drafted from the ground up and implemented telling you that it was going to be the greatest ever, it's a complete and total failure. We had to scrap the whole thing.
Yeah, and there's the sunk cost fallacy at work there. I think they did eventually have to scrap it because people respond to incentives, but you can't control their behavior in the way that you think you can. So you just need to look at what worked about it and then figure out a way to better do it.
You just described the OODA loop for everybody that's not a military listener. That's the observe, orient, decide, and act, where it's this. The idea is that you come up with a plan, you see how it works, you make changes, and then you do it again, and it goes in this circle, and it just keeps going. And theoretically, every loop gets a little bit better.
Yeah. So, long live the Bad at Magic Fitness Challenge. You and I can still continue to have be each other's accountability buddies, and I hope there are people out there that are as well. And maybe we'll give it another try at some point and take the lessons we learned because we did get some participation. But
if I can figure out a way to make it so user friendly that Ben can just have a thought and then his metrics are collected and then uploaded to the site without him having to actually take action, maybe then I will satisfy the requirements.
I want you to have an API that integrates with my fitness app that I already use.
You know how much work that sounds like? That just sounds like so much work.
All right. There's another thing that we mentioned last time that I want to follow up on, and that is that I got a free subscription to 1 year's worth of Masterclass. It's only 11 months now because I've had it for a month and no one's used it yet.
Details. Yeah, this was great. We set up a contest for our listeners to go and post their best bad at parenting stories on the Reddit. And Ben, I'll tell you what, I have not enjoyed reading bad at parenting stories like I have enjoyed reading these ones.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I know, nobody submitted, so it was zero work. Super Great. Loved it.
Yeah, I was kind of disappointed. And I, again, just like I described with my managers back when I was 20, like where did we go wrong? So I was kind of thinking, were there people that are reluctant to share their bad at parenting stories because they know we might retell them on the podcast? Because we also invited for another kind of audience participation on that episode, and we had lots of people write in about that. So obviously it wasn't just that our audience doesn't participate.
No, we have great audience participation when we have things that they want. I think that's the key.
Right.
It's like, oh, what do you want us to talk about? And people get super passionate about the things that they care about. Oh, hey, we want you to write an essay as an application to a contest where you win free classes to night school. In retrospect, it doesn't sound like the best prize.
Okay, but I don't know. Was it the part that they had to write the essay, or was it the part that it was free night school? Like, this is $100 value, but if you've never watched maybe I failed to sell Masterclass. Maybe I assumed that other people feel the way I did every time I saw an ad for it. I thought, ooh, that looks really interesting. I would like to have access to that.
Yeah, but you're also the guy that's randomly driving through a town down south, hears about a football game, and decides to go to the football game. Like, you're that kind of engaging person. For somebody on the other side like me, like if I hear about a contest that, and then the prize is $100 in kale. I mean, yeah, it's $100 value, but I don't really like kale.
Okay, well, here's what we're going to do. Because the cutoff was yesterday and we didn't get any applicants, what we're going to do is now we're going to offer it randomly to one of our patrons. So if you're not currently a patron of the Bad at Magic podcast, you can become one by going to patreon.com/badatmagic. But we've already selected the person this time, so maybe you'll get in on the next random drawing of something cool that we want to give up. So I'm going to give this $100 Masterclass subscription to a person that we randomly selected from amongst our patrons. If they don't want it, I guess we'll randomly select another one and give it to them.
Here's the moral of this story. If you want to get free stuff maybe sometimes, and you want to put in zero effort, becoming a patron, that's the way to do it.
There you go. All right, so the other thing we did get a lot of participation on last time was that we are planning this year, we didn't do this last year, to apply the Bad at Magic magic rating system to some favorite Christmas movies.
Which is just going to be great. Just so great. We've already watched one in my household because we couldn't wait any longer.
So far, we've had 5 get added to the list, and I started writing them out, and I realized there was a lot of diversity here as far as the medium of the film.
Okay.
So there was Nightmare Before Christmas, which is like claymation, right?
Yeah, stop motion animation is the preferred.
Stop motion. Okay,
Yep.
Stop motion animation. There's somebody nominated Polar Express, which is this weird kind of CGI that was like the kind where like people acted out and they have on suits and it tracks their movements.
It was motion capture CGI. It was
motion capture CGI.
Absolutely top of the line when it was first put out, which now falls so hard into the uncanny valley it's hard to watch.
Yeah, it is kind of hard to watch. But we'll do it for the sake of the integrity of the podcast and appreciation of our listeners' inputs. The next one is the Muppets Christmas Carol, which is this weird universe I've lived in my whole life where there's like humans coexisting in a world with like hand puppets and just acting like they're other beings that are equal in station and value.
Personally, I find that very charming, especially when the movie does take zero time and effort to explain that, and it just is a thing that exists. Have you seen any of the new Muppet movies where they do that? Where they kind of identify that like the Muppets are like a different thing, but then there's a live action guy whose brother is a Muppet, so that's just what it is.
Yes.
Have you seen those movies?
Yeah.
They're good. Go watch those.
I'm trying to think of which one it was. I mean, there was the one with...
It was the first one with, what's the guy? I don't know the guy's name. He's on How I Met Your Mother, the tall guy.
Yeah.
I recommend the first one. The second one was kind of weird, but I think he personally was trying to bring the Muppets back and made that movie, and it was good.
Yeah, it's like, hey, this is my brother. He's a puppet, but we're just going to pretend that that's not a thing.
Next on the list was Arthur Christmas, which is what I put on the list because this movie surprised me. I don't know where it came from. I think we might have bought it out of a Walmart $5 bin or somebody gave it to us a gift or whatever. It somehow appeared in my house 3 or 4 years ago. And I remember sitting down like, oh, we're going to watch this kids movie as a family. And like every parent watching a kids movie like, okay, settle in with low expectations. And that movie blew me away for how funny and just great it was.
Yeah, and I'll watch it and find out and make up my own mind about it. Now, is that one CGI?
That one is CGI, and I'll tell you right now, Ben, you are going to love that movie to death.
All right. I hope you haven't set my expectations too high.
Without going into spoilers, this is the only movie that shows the North Pole Operations Command Center for Christmas night.
Okay. I mean, it's not like that hasn't appeared on film before, but yes.
You're such a Debbie Downer. My Christmas movies.
Okay, so I added the Santa Claus, the classic Disney movie from the mid-'90s with Tim Allen, where he accidentally becomes Santa Claus.
Yeah, who doesn't remember Tim Allen from growing up in the 90s?
I was surprised we didn't have any live-action ones, so I added that. Do we need to go back farther in time? Like, do we need to do like Miracle on 34th Street or the Miracle?
Okay, so if we're going to talk about going back in time,
Life.
My wife's family every year for Christmas loves watching 2 movies. One of them's called White Christmas, I believe, and the other one is Holiday Inn. And those are from the era where Hollywood still thought tap dancing for 15 minutes on screen was entertainment.
Yeah.
Like those, what blows me away every time is whenever I watch those movies, they are. I don't encourage people to go watch these movies, but if you have time to kill, watch Holiday Inn and White Christmas back to back. And I'll tell you what, Ben, they had to have been shot with the same cast on the same set at the same time. It's like they just overshot the crap out of one movie and then in the editing room decided
edited it into 2 movies.
You know what? If we shoot like 3 more scenes, we can get 2 movies out of this, boss. All right, let's do it.
Well, as far as I know, there's no magic in either of those, which is why I think we've also struck Die Hard from the list.
You see, that's just sad. Like I saw Die Hard on the list and I actually got a little excited. And I've already told my wife, we're watching Die Hard this holiday season. We have to because it's the podcast is requiring it. So
yeah, I was being kind of cheeky by putting it in, but if this is the Bad at Magic podcast, I mean, there's no magic in any of those that we just mentioned. So
there's a ton of magic in Die Hard as far as how much punishment the human body can take in a single evening before he passes out from blood loss and or just blunt force trauma.
All right. Well, I suppose we can stretch it a little bit and redefine our definition of magic, but we'll stick with so far the nominees: Nightmare Before Christmas, Polar Express, Muppet Christmas Carol, Arthur Christmas, and The Santa Claus.
Sounds good. Maybe Die Hard will be a bonus episode.
Well, while we're talking about the season leading up to Christmas, what did you give me your complaints about your neighbor and Christmas lights?
All right. So, do you do Christmas lights on your house, Ben?
My wife and I, throughout our marriage, when we decided early on that we were going to have 6 kids, we both just picked a few things that we recognize are traditional things where we decided we were going to minimize our commitment in those areas. For instance, my wife has a strict no pets policy, up to and including anything, ant farm, goldfish, definitely no puppies or kittens. So we definitely decided early on that this is the kind of thing that probably falls more in like the dad area of things, and I just decided I wasn't doing it. My kids at times have wrung their hands about it a little bit, but if you've never done it, they just like, oh well, I guess that's something other families do. So no, we don't put Christmas lights outside of our house. We put some inside.
Okay, that's completely fair. I remember when I bought and owned my first house in the terrible place that is Clovis, New Mexico, and we didn't have any kids at the time, and I had a whole weekends to myself that I had to fill with, random things that I like to do. And one of those things was I decided to deck our house in Christmas lights. And so ever since 2010 was the first year that we lived there, I've been putting Christmas lights up on the house, whatever house we happen to be living in. you just keep the Christmas lights. They just stay in a big tub. They get worse and degraded over the years, but then you slowly recycle them. It doesn't matter. So I do Christmas lights.
How long does it take, start to finish, to put up the ones you got?
Well, so that's tricky to answer. In the current house that we have it kind of down to a science. And 2 years ago, I spent several extra hours outside drilling and screwing in hooks that remain in my eaves all year round that you can't see.
Okay.
But I can now I can hang the lights in,
So after that initial investment of the infrastructure, now it's easy to put up and take down.
Yes. This year, we did extra lights this year. And it probably took a start to finish maybe 3 hours. And my wife does come out and she does a lot of the groundwork. I do the lights that are up on the house that are high to reach. And she does like the pretty ones where you like lay them out in the yard and they do blinky things with the blow up snowman and all that stuff.
Okay. And now, all told, how much space does all this stuff take up when it's compacted and put into containers?
We have 3 big, like Rubbermaid Tupperware containers, like
40-gallon totes.
Yeah, like the big ones. There's probably 3 of those, and then for that's just the exterior lights. We have 2 smaller ones for the interior stuff that I can't get rid of. I don't care about the interior stuff at all, but my wife does.
I'm just adverse to things that are kind of bulky and permanent-ish.
Well, here's the indoor the indoor decorations are kind of a trade-off because I love Thanksgiving, and so Nicole has invested a lot into like interior Thanksgiving decorations that I very much love and appreciate. And so I just kind of had to make that deliberate decision that she gets whatever interior Christmas decorations she wants because she does up Thanksgiving for me. I don't have to do any of it. So I've lost.
When you say that, does that mean like your default is not doing it and you are making a concession?
For the interior?
Yeah.
Yes. I just like I set up the tree, like the Christmas tree. I will put it physically up, but I don't decorate it at all. I just care very little for interior Christmas decorations. Okay,
but how does this relate to your neighbors?
So this relates to my neighbors because I spent, like I said, this year 3 hours putting up lights, and it took longer this year because we put up extra lights. I bought and then strung up extra white lights across our courtyard, so our courtyard is all nicely lit and it looks so nice from the street. Our house is not super lit, but it's not one of those underlit houses. It's not one of those houses you drive by and they've got one strand across the eaves and they called it good. Now, we've got stuff in the yard. We did the tree. We've got icicles that tinkle different colors down the tree. And we have a light up Yoda in our front yard that we're very proud of. And so I would say our house is like a medium decorated for lights. Like you drive by and go, oh, that's okay. But the person that lives across the street from me, he spends 4 full days every November putting up his Christmas lights, and every square inch of his front yard and building are covered in lights. And to the point where he also then strings up he has giant PVC arches that he erects every year. He has like a Santa Claus on a ramp, like ascending into the heavens. His lights blink in time to music that is broadcast outside of his house. You can walk by and hear Christmas cheer, and it's like such an extravaganza of just wonderful holiday goodness that nobody even looks at my house.
Is this just necessary if you live in a suburban neighborhood in America that you have some Clark Griswold, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation neighbor that you're competing with?
I'm not. This is the thing. I don't want to compete with him. The second that I admit that, I've got to beat that guy, I've lost. Because it's just not going to happen. I don't want to put in that much time, effort, and resources into trying to compete with a guy across the street. I'd prefer that he just dialed it back a bit so I didn't look so bad. Because my house now looks, like I said, it's like a medium. But it looks
But what does that look like? I mean, a secret note in his mailbox or something? And he's not going to change what he's doing because of your opinions.
I think it looks like me standing on my sidewalk in like my slippers and my robe, like drinking heavily and just staring at his house for half an hour every night when he turns his lights on. And then he waves at me. It's like, oh, hey, Josh. And I just like scowl at him and take a sip. I don't know. How do you intimidate somebody to do less?
That's a good question. I think you need an MBA for that. So there's this house here in Tampa I'm going to go see that's apparently one of the, if not the most decorated houses in the world. They have a whole website and news articles and over 500,000 lights. Apparently they start 3 or 4 months in advance and bring them in semi trucks or something like that. And when you reach that institution level execution of putting up Christmas lights in your yard, your neighbors have just got to either get excited about it or just be resigned to the fact that this is your thing.
Yeah, and that's the other part is we're talking about different levels of lights. Like I'm at the level where I am giving up the 3 totes worth of space in my garage all year round for Christmas lights, things that are going to be on our house for 1 month. That guy, he's either giving up an entire wall of his garage to the stuff that he's storing in there, or he has a storage unit that's off-site.
Yeah.
And I just can't imagine paying rent on every month. I would sigh heavily as I paid that bill.
I would be surprised if he doesn't exceed his costs, at least monetarily, in donations. The website I looked at was very much set up for that kind of thing. And when you get that much attention, I assume you get a considerable amount in donations. The only thing is how much of a just time commitment that would be. I mean, it would just have to be your hobby.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's never the pure monetary thing. You have to get something intrinsic. You have to be internally motivated to do something like that to make it anywhere near worth breaking even when it comes to the cost versus the benefits.
Maybe one of these days I'll give in and actually put some lights on the outside the house. But since I'm not there this year, this isn't the year. Maybe next year.
I need to put a footnote on this whole thing because I sound kind of like a Scrooge. Like why am I putting down my neighbor for putting in all this effort? Like I shouldn't do that. I just kind of resent how bad it makes my house look in comparison.
Well, you don't really strike me as a keeping up with the Joneses kind of guy, though.
Well, that's why I don't put up all the lights to compete with the guy across the street.
But it still bugs you.
I mean, a little bit. Like, if he honestly, it would bug me less if he lived 2 doors down because then I wouldn't have to look at it every time I walked out. Like, that's the amount of effort that I could be putting into it if I cared as much as he did.
So I went rollerblading yesterday, and I normally just go down this jogging path that's kind of sterile through a business neighborhood.
Wait, hang on a second. Let me check my phone real quick. Okay, yeah, it's 2020. You were rollerblading?
It's what I do to break it up when I don't feel like running.
Sorry, I thought we flashed back to 1993 for a second. But no, I'm sorry. I interrupted. Go ahead.
So I didn't feel like running yesterday, and so I did my normal path, and I'm fitter than I was, so it feels shorter. Like, I don't know if you had that thing where like your normal running path, you get to the end and you're kind of like, that felt kind of short. Well, it felt shorter, so I took a detour into the local neighborhood. And as I was going through the neighborhood, a lot of people had their lights up. And I'm like, this is nice. Like, it made me feel happy to go through the neighborhood with all the lights up.
How old are you, Ben? No, I want to paint a picture for our listeners here. How old are you, sir?
43.
All right, so
I thought that was a hypothetical question.
So you're a 43-year-old man rollerblading through a neighborhood looking at the Christmas lights? Like, did you have a boom box and like some big headphones or something too?
No, I was listening to an audiobook through my AirPods.
I'm just imagining the sight and the picture that you would paint. Like, if I drove past you, like in my neighborhood, I'd probably have to double back or do another lap to make sure, like, what is this? Did I really just see a middle-aged man rollerblading through the neighborhood?
Sometimes people wave, just a friendly wave, like, hey, there's a guy rollerblading.
I have no response to that.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about something else.
Okay. What do you got?
I had something happen, and I realized this is something, I don't know if it needs to be a feature on the program, but it's something that I think about a lot, and that is how, this is a podcast about games, life, and other things. Let's talk about games. So sometimes there's games that we spend in our life, and, there's been a lot of people spend a lot of time and ink decrying games as an evil upon society. And I think you and I both agreed that they're not. And so I had this situation happen in my life where I realized that I'd learned something from a game, very specifically from a game that had a positive effect on my life. And I want to talk about that.
Okay. Yes, that is. Let's talk about all the good things that games give back to us. So
in the game Magic the Gathering, there's an element of skill and there's also an element of random luck. And when you start off a game against your opponent, there's this little process you go through where you determine if your shuffled deck yields up the first 7 cards, if they're going to be sufficient to start a fair game. And over time, to kind of reduce the amount of randomness in the game, they've refined what they call the mulligan rule. Everyone knows the word mulligan, maybe in like the game of golf, that means you just get another shot. Well, in the game of Magic, mulligan is a formal rule that basically gives you a chance that if you just get an unplayable opening hand, to randomly get another opening hand with a slight disadvantage in exchange for the opportunity to, give it another go.
Yeah, so the current iteration of that rule is if you draw the first 7 cards, you look at them, you decide they're not good enough, you can put all of them back, draw 7 new ones, but now you have to put one back at the end. If you decide to keep these new 7, you have to put one of them back at the bottom of the deck, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's going to be random no matter what, but you can either keep the 7 you have or take another random 6.
Right, and based on the rules of the game, some random sets of 7 are way better than others.
Right. So there's some hands that it's just obvious. Like, there's no way that keeping this hand will yield a competitive game. I'll just lose easily because these 7 cards aren't good enough for me to be competitive. And sometimes you might have one that's on the borderline where you think, maybe I should keep this one, maybe I don't. Here's the life lesson. Early on, I saw people do what I came to realize was a bad decision, where when they'd reached the point where they had to make the decision with the unknown information, you do not know what the next 2 or 3 cards of your library are. You have to make your decision whether or not to mulligan based on the known information.
The cards that you're looking at.
Yes. But what they would do is say, okay, I'm going to mulligan, and then instead of shuffling their library and picking another 7 random cards, after making the decision, they would look at the next 2 or 3 cards on top of their library.
Just to kind of see what would have happened if they decided to keep that previous hand that they decided to get rid of.
Yes. So what's the problem with that?
So the problem with that is they are now trying to judge their decision, whether it was good or bad, not based on the known information, but based on unknown information, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, exactly.
So they are going to judge themselves and their decision-making capacity based on information they could not possibly have known.
Exactly. That's exactly the thing. And there are times, so here's the comparison to life. There are times in your life where you might have a decision that you have to make, and there's a point reached where you have to make the decision, and you can't find out more, you can't know, you can't have a crystal ball and see into the future or find out things you don't know. You just have to make a decision, and you have to do the best you can. Now, if whenever you had a time like that come up and you made the decision, down the road it turned out to be the wrong decision, the lesson you learn from that can't be that was a mistake. So here's what someone taught me. A wise Magic player showed me, and he's like, he saw me do the thing where I made a decision to take a mulligan and then look at the next 2 or 3 cards in my library. And he says, don't do that. And I said, why not? He says, because you're reinforcing bad decision making. If you need to take a mulligan, make the right decision with the known information and then be firm in your decision. Don't second guess yourself.
This is good information. This is a good lesson to learn. I've said this for a while now because I make a lot of mistakes in my life. I have anybody that's listened to the podcast or knows me in real life realizes that I have taken what is my life and burned it to the ground and started over from scratch at least 3 times now. And what allows me to keep doing that is I have this thing that I say, and it is, I trust myself to have made the best decision that I could at the time I was called to make the decision with the information that I had.
Yes.
I trust myself now, and I trust past me kind of at the time to that. If I look back, I can tell you right now, like, for example, crossing over to drones was a horrible, horrible mistake for me in my Air Force career. But I don't blame myself or consider it a fault of my own for making that decision because that was the best decision I could have made at the time.
Right. If you go back in time and are past Josh, you'd still make the same decision.
Yes. I mean, with the information.
I don't mean knowing what you know now.
Yes.
I just mean there's no random element inserted there that changed the outcome.
Right. Exactly. And so that's the lesson that you learned from this, from the mulligan rule. And how have you applied
and also
that to
not
life?
second guessing the decisions you made in the past.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was kind of disappointed when I found out I wasn't going to get the teaching job that I wanted, and I look back on the things that I did, but I did the best I could with the information I had at the time. So the lesson I have right now is just don't beat myself up about where I'm at now because I did the best I could back then.
Yeah, just that is honestly the best lesson. Stop beating yourself up. You did the best you could. Focus on the now.
Yeah. So that's my life lesson I learned from playing Magic the Gathering.
Very good. You mind if I throw in one?
Yeah. What do you got?
So this one, I don't know how applicable this is to the real world, but I remember there was a point in my Magic career, and I will remember this night forever. I was sitting at Friday Night Magic in Virginia. You were there. You were off playing another game with somebody. And I remember sitting at the table, and our game was running long. I was playing the control deck. He was playing the control deck. It was just a slow game. And then I remember you came over, and you're like, why are you taking so long? And I said, well, here's my problem. If I do this, he's going to do this. And if I do this, he's going to do this, and then do this. And then I'm going to do, and like, I was able to, like, verbally, I explained the entire state of the board, what was in my hand and what was in my opponent's hand, and described the actions that would go back and forth. And I was trying to decide between them. What I remember the best about this is my opponent's jaw dropped, and he literally
when you described his course of action.
He showed me his hand, and I had described every card that he was holding, and basically had figured out how the game was going to unfold for the next 2 or 3 plays. And He was just flabbergasted by that. And I remember that being the moment where I realized, oh, I've reached this level where I'm not just playing my cards, I'm playing my opponent's cards.
Okay.
And
that's a big step in the development of the cognitive abilities of a Magic player.
Yes, but it's also applicable to real life in that I was looking at the situation where I had limited control over the overall state of affairs, but I was able to take myself out of my perspective and recognize what the other perspective was. And just being able to identify how other people would react to the decisions that I would make would have been a lesson that I should have applied to my real life, and I wouldn't have had to burn my life to the ground 2 more times. But it took me, like in the game of Magic, I figured that out back in 2009. In my actual emotional, physical adult life, I didn't start applying that lesson probably until 2013 or 14.
All right, well, give me an example of like a situation where it's similar to like you playing against an opponent where you have to make a decision based on anticipating what they're going to do.
It's less about that. It was more about understanding that the decisions that I am making, how they are going to be perceived or how other people are going to react to them, I think is the lesson that I was trying to get across.
Okay.
This actually happened. I can kind of apply this to something that happened very recently. Is I was in a meeting with my boss again, because I work and I have a boss and we have meetings. And so I was there. And she was describing a process that was a redundant process that was already captured by another process that we had. And then I started to explain to her that, oh, this process is unnecessary extra overhead and baggage because all of the objectives are already captured elsewhere in the things that we do. But she was adamant that she wanted this extra process. And so we were having this back and forth where I disagreed with her, and she was like, well, no, we're going to do it this way. And it took me a while before I recognized, well, hey, I just had to stop and analyze how I was coming across from the external perspective. I just seemed like
insubordinate,
insubordinate, stubborn. Like I'm not listening to my boss. Like I had to stop and like, you know what? I'm taking this the wrong way, ma'am. If you say this is something we need to do, I'll be on record as I disagree because I think it's captured here. But you're the boss, and I will do what you tell me. And this is like one of the first jobs I've had where I've ever like caved and come down like that. In previous jobs, I would have drawn my flaming sword and just made enemies and burned bridges and just been pig-headed and terrible about it.
Nice. I'm glad you've learned to recognize that.
I'm glad that as a 37-year-old man, you can recognize when you're being a jerk sometimes. Yeah, it took me a long time to learn that, Ben.
Or when you're both playing control decks and you're making everyone wait on you because you've gone to time.
Okay, that's different because I played those decks on purpose because I loved doing that to everybody.
You're such a griefer sometimes. All right. Well, while we're doing this kind of grab bag random stuff, I want to talk about something that's been on my mind recently, and that is, we've talked a little bit about how COVID has affected our lives and our children and our schooling. You know, your son's doing like remote karate lessons, and we're doing like, what do you have, a drive-by parade in your neighborhood tonight?
Tonight, before recording this podcast, there was a local group of off-roading enthusiasts that every year deck out all of their vehicles in Christmas lights and paraphernalia, and they do a parade where they drive through the neighborhood.
So these are like big, loud trucks with giant tires?
No, the opposite. They are like those souped-up golf carts that have roll cages and things that are super loud still. But
right, because they don't have very good exhausts.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so the thing I want to talk about, though, in relation to COVID is how we've talked on this program about the shortages that it caused because of like supply chain problems and people's panic, and it was the normal things that kind of make some degree of intuitive sense. But we've also seen that there have been some shortages caused by COVID that really don't make a lot of intuitive sense. So that's what I want to talk about for a few minutes.
I have 3 of these off the top of my head that have impacted my life. So yes, let's talk about these.
All right. So I'll go first and then you give me one.
Okay, go ahead.
So one I found that's kind of weird is bicycles. Like here's my theory. Because COVID is like taking a bunch of people that want to do things like stay fit, that would normally go to the gym, it caused like this run on like home fitness equipment, and the supply chain wasn't ready to meet the surge in demand. So all of a sudden things like rollerblades and bicycles and stuff, all of the backlog got emptied out and retailers were just out of inventory and there was no more coming.
I think this is going to be a common theme amongst this. Is either the supply or the demand shifted abruptly, and our just-in-time, super streamlined, maximum efficiency, no waste supply chains fell apart.
Right, but if you go back, if you and I had sat down at the beginning and said, all right, we're about to have a pandemic, we're going to go on quarantine, everything's going to change, make a list of things you think that will affect. This wouldn't have been on my list.
I like to phrase it this way: if we were in Vegas and we knew the pandemic was coming and we needed to lay down odds for the things that we thought were going to go out of stock. Yeah.
Bicycles was not on my list.
Bicycles would not have made my list either. I have heard of this, though. I've also heard on the internet that it's not just adult bikes, but also children's bikes are going out of stock.
So what was on your list?
So the first one that I'm going to put on my list was tortilla chips, which is the stupidest thing to go out of stock on. This was, admittedly, the supply chain has caught back up and things are back to normal now. But there was a couple of months in Arizona where there was no tortilla chips to be found. And what's really interesting is I think I can track this back to one meeting where we made fun of the toilet paper shortages, back when this thing first started. And one of our governor had weekly briefings where he'd come up and he would talk about all of the different problems.
Governor Ducey, who ghosted the president this week.
Governor Doug Ducey, who has made an assortment of decisions, some good, some bad. Think what you want about him. It's a politics thing. I don't want to get down into that. He did ghost the president's phone call, which was hilarious. But one meeting that they had with him, somebody asked a question about supply shortages. Is there anything that the state government is doing about the supply shortages of toilet paper and tortilla chips? And what's hilarious is before that, I don't think there was a shortage of tortilla chips at all. I think that
guy... So he just said it, and then it became so because he said it?
After I didn't recognize a tortilla chip shortage until after that guy said that. Maybe he had some insider information and knew that the warehouses were running out and it hadn't trickled out to the consumer yet. Or my personal conspiracy theory that I want to believe in because this is way cooler is that he was conducting a social experiment to see if he could artificially create a shortage.
I feel like every producer wishes they could tap into this kind of latent panic demand. Some onion growers lurking on the side of the stage during a press conference and runs up on stage and grabs a microphone and says, "Oh no, there's a shortage on onions." What?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I want to have happened, but it probably isn't.
All right, so there was the toilet paper and the hand sanitizer and soap and all sold out and stuff, and that was predictable and related. But I remember initially, right when the quarantine first started, everyone bought up all the bread, which was stupid. Bread goes bad in a week. And I remember seeing, I mark my words, I was like, this isn't going to last. And a week after the bread shortage, the photos started to emerge online of giant sacks full of moldy bread out on people's curbs on garbage day. What were they? I don't know what they thought was going to happen. But what this led to is when somebody went to a store and they wanted bread and they couldn't find any, their thought pattern says, how can I replace this unmet demand in my life? They're not just willing to like transition to non-bread, not NAAN as in Indian flatbread, but like NON bread.
Like just no bread diet. I must.
Right, no bread diet.
This is America. We have to have at least 800 carbs a day or we will die.
Right. So maybe you've seen online people doing things like having sourdough starters or stuff like that. The reason there was is because when people transitioned off not being able to find bread, they went to yeast, and that quickly sold out. And I remember needing yeast and just taking it for granted that I could always go to the store and get what I need. And it wasn't just sold out. It was like every size of it was sold out. You know, the little packets, the jars, the big jars, everything.
And let's be clear, grocery stores don't stock a ton of yeast. Again, this is a failing of the streamlined supply and demand chain, because typically people buy a couple packets of yeast and that's all they need. So I remember the shelf in my grocery store of yeast being about this big, and listeners, I'm holding my fingers very close together. There's not very much yeast stocked at the grocery store in the first place.
So now people are keeping containers of rotting grains in their cupboards so that they can have their own leaven for their bread.
We experienced the same thing, but it was the entire baking aisle. I swear, we couldn't find flour, granulated sugar, nothing for like a month.
But you found macadamia nuts.
Don't you bring up those stupid macadamia nut cookies, Ben.
All right, so what else did you notice shortages on?
All right, so this one's less important, but I've noticed it recently, and I've been following it because I just find it so interesting. And so this is about graphics cards and computers. I'm going to go full computer nerd on you for a little bit.
Go ahead.
Okay. So both the major manufacturers of video cards, which is NVIDIA and AMD, have released brand new generation of video cards, started back in late September and went into October and November. They released like the latest and the greatest. Like, they're just so awesome, and you need these. These are amazing. And frankly, they are. Like, for price, for performance, and everything, these are great, wonderful things to have. But what's interesting is if you flash back to like February and March, when this all first kicked off, there was rumblings and people talked about in the media and on these tech news sites that this is going to cause a problem with the supply chain for computers, because around that time was when China was having their major shutdowns and quarantines, and they weren't producing. And there's only a handful of manufacturers of, certain components that go into all computers around the world. There's only a couple of manufacturers of those, and most of them are in China. And what's interesting is that the timing lined up perfectly, where the manufacturers had this pause for like a month to 6 weeks where they weren't able to meet their quotas or their outputs and their demands. And that flowed into the wholesalers, which flowed into the suppliers, which flowed into the warehouses and just down the line, until it hit the consumer, where they cannot meet consumer need because of this lack of raw materials to build these things. And it all hit right now, fourth quarter of 2020. Because there's a brand new generation of graphics cards. There's like 4 or 5 different like types of graphics cards that were all released in the last 3 months. Brand new, everybody wants them, and they are sold out everywhere. Not just those ones, but then also the last generation.
Yeah.
Like,
people are like scalping them and reselling them and stuff like that.
And the top line graphics cards from the last generation are also all sold out everywhere. And it's just because the 2 things happened, which I thought was so cool because of COVID. First of all, it affected the supply, because like I said early in the quarantine, the supply dipped for that critical 4 to 6 weeks. And then at the same time, everybody's working from home. Everybody is stuck inside. You can't go anywhere. So the demand for high performance computers and video gaming machines has increased.
So supply went down, demand went up.
Yes. And so now we are in this situation where if you wanted, I've been watching this because there was a graphics card I thought about buying because I saw it on sale for $250 in October. I checked for that same graphics card today. It is completely sold out, and their listing price is $400.
Whoa.
You believe that?
So I remember, I've tracked this to varying degrees throughout my life, but I remember at times in the past where like computer components that were perhaps reliant on one particular rare earth metal or something like that in order to function, that is only supplied by one mind in one part of the world, and there's like political unrest in that part of the world or whatever, the factory breaks down or something, and then it causes this industry-wide backup while we catch up or find a second source or something like that. But those are usually little tiny hiccups. You're saying this is happening on a much bigger scale because at the same time, the supply went down and the demand went up.
Yes. Like you can go to your favorite technology website and look for graphics cards. They are, like, for the most part, across the board, sold out.
Wow. Okay. I got one more.
Go for it.
So this is one, I guess, that I'd always done before, but I'd taken for granted. So like when I used to work fast food, the way it works at fast food is some manager somewhere in some corporation figured out what the optimal amount of money to give someone is in their cash drawer at the beginning of their shift. At the beginning of your shift, they hand you a drawer and it has like $75 in it. And it's mostly in like singles and fives and change. So that then over the course of your shift, when people pay for their, whatever $5 meal with a 20, and you break that up into change and return it to them, you can you don't have so much money in your drawer that if you get robbed, they lose a lot of money, but you have enough money in your drawer so that it doesn't disrupt normal operations to be able to make change to the money that you're transacting.
I have to say, as an accountant, that sounds like the world's funnest spreadsheet to make, to optimize the amount of money in the change drawer.
And occasionally you don't. Whatever, you get an extra busy shift or everyone's paying with $2 bills or whatever, something happens and like, oh no, I ran out of quarters, and you go, take a 20 to your boss and he gives you a roll of quarters or whatever, and you put it in and your drawer stays balanced, but you need to work it out. Well, the part I'd taken for granted is the fact that every shift I would start with change in my drawer, and even though sometimes people would use change to pay for their meal, for the most part they weren't. So change was being consumed by the people that I was trading money for food.
That makes sense. Change was always flowing one way. You never really
Yes.
got change. You always given it out.
Right. And then I don't know what happens to it after that. I'd never really thought about it, but it goes into customers' pockets and they take it home. At the end of the day, they stick it on top of their dresser, they put it in a jar, whatever. Somehow that change has an economy of how it's circulating around the economy. And for whatever reason, COVID disrupted that so much that it caused a shortage.
Okay.
Whatever mechanism it was taking change and putting it back into circulation broke. And all of a sudden, everywhere I went, businesses had signs up that said, you got to pay with a card or exact change because we can't make change.
This is interesting because I've seen those same signs and I just assumed it was a supply problem. I assumed that there was some issue at the mints or wherever they're making change.
No, it's a circulation problem.
Yeah. I always just assumed change died when it got, because for me personally, if I'm ever given change, I do exactly the thing that you said. It sits in my pocket. I go home. I take it out of my pocket. I have one of those big giant cups that you get, from the movie theater or a theme park or wherever you get big cups.
Do you have something like when it gets full, do you take it to the coin star at the grocery store and trade it in?
No, I get a new cup. And then that cup goes into a cabinet somewhere. And we have...
Wait, how many do you have?
Okay, so I can think right now in my closet, I have 2 full cups of coins. One of them is only 3/4 of the way, and that's what I'm currently filling. And I am aware of 2-gallon Ziploc bags in a cupboard that are also full of coins. And then I know both of my kids are also collecting coins in a drawer somewhere.
Okay, so you guys are part of the problem.
Yeah, of course we're part of it. But I've always been part of the problem, Ben. I'm never putting coins back into the world. I get that it's money, but until it's a substantial amount, who cares? I remember...
I do this... I have a very low threshold. When I start accumulating change, I put it back into the economy. Go ahead. You remember?
What? Huh? How? How do you put change back into the economy?
I have certain limited number of things that I use cash for, and I'll just make an effort to spend change as part of it.
That sounds...
Whether it's like, putting quarters into the car wash or buying, my daily snack out of the snack fund at work. I'll just stick the change in my pocket with the intent of using it for that purpose so that it goes back into circulation.
And this is the same guy that wouldn't measure his neck for the Magic Fitness Challenge, everyone. Yeah. Listeners, this is a man of many facets over here.
Sorry, but I interrupted. You said, I remember.
So, do you remember I don't remember the exact name, but the whip style beef jerky, where you could buy beef jerky that was 4 feet long in a container?
Yeah.
Okay. So
You're talking about the round ones?
Yeah, the round ones, and they were super, super long sticks.
Yeah.
All right, my parents have a big tube, a big container where 100 of those came in. And so it's this giant diameter just pipe. And I don't know when we got that. It's one of those antiques that your parents just have had since you've been in existence and have been aware of it. And so, as far as I'm concerned, my parents were created from the ether with this tube that sits in the laundry room. And they cut a slot in the top of it. And I remember it was in the laundry room because my mother, whenever whenever coins showed up in the laundry, she would just take it and put it right into this tube.
Okay.
And it would slowly.
That's interesting.
And it's a clear tube, and it would just fill up. And the idea was every time it got to the top, she would then conscript her children into rolling all of those coins into the little paper wrappers.
That's better than using a Coinstar. They take like 5% or something like that.
Well, first of all, she worked at a bank, so she had access to all of the coin wrappers that she needed. And second, Coinstar didn't exist back then. But free labor existed, and that free labor was this guy. And so we would roll all of these coins, and then...
Did you have any kind of mechanical device that aided, or it was all manual?
No. Why would you give a kid a mechanical device to make their job easier? No. I remember whole days in the summer...
Work for work's sake.
I remember, like... The spending the entire day, start to finish. I'd wake up and do this all day, and then go to bed in the summertime between school, sitting in the living room with this giant pile of coins in a mixing bowl next to me on a TV tray, rolling them while I'm watching TV.
Okay, so how much? When you got all done and you counted up the value of it, how much money does a 4-foot high Slim Jim container contain?
I will have to check with my parents, but because I was never privy to it.
Well, come on, you weren't counting how many rolls you got while you were doing it?
Not really. It was on the order of hundreds of dollars, though. I mean, it was. Okay. They would take the money that we got out of that tube and fully fund a family vacation with it.
Wow. Back in 2018, I went TDY to Norfolk I went on a business trip to Norfolk for some professional military education, which meant my weekends were kind of free. And there was a hurricane that hit North Carolina while I was out there. So on my weekends, I'd go down to North Carolina and help out with the disaster cleanup. And we went into this disabled veterans home, and his home had flooded up to like, oh man, the water line was like 4 foot high in his house. So we had to tear out all the walls so that it didn't just fill up with mold and stuff. And they'd been keeping one of those like 5-gallon containers that you keep on top of a water cooler.
Yeah.
Full of change. And at some point it had gotten moved or whatever, and it broke. And so there was an entire 5-gallon container's worth of change all over the floor. And I remember just sweeping and scooping it up with the dustpan, just thinking, man, this is so much money. But it was just, we treat it like it's of no value because it's coinage.
Yeah, coins are stupid.
And
I think,
and COVID broke it. And I would love to just thumb $100 to save the clock tower, but we're not there yet.
I think CGP Grey did a great video, and this video is like a decade old now. But he made a great video of making the case why pennies and nickels should be taken out of circulation. They are a drain on the economy, cost more than they're worth, and they're just sucking up man hours.
Yeah, it's like there's just this weird affinity people have for them out of tradition and not because they have a useful function.
I think the only way we're ever going to get rid of change is we're slowly transitioning to a cashless economy anyway. Like I can't remember the last time I had cash in my wallet. It's always just cards now.
Yeah, I have. I can't wait to get there. But right now, I carry a little bit of cash in my wallet for doing things like giving to the homeless guy in the corner or buying a drink out of the snack fund at work because there's just no other way to do those transactions without cash.
I remember my dad telling me when I was in college, it's like I was going to drive back to Colorado from Phoenix. Like, oh, you got cash? I go, I don't need cash. Like, you have to have cash. Like, every single place that I go on the entire route from here to Colorado is going to take cards. I promise you.
Mm-hmm. You're reminding me of a scene from Clueless where Cher's learning how to drive and she asks her if she wants to learn how to park and she goes, what's the point? Everywhere you go has valet.
Oh, Alicia Silverstone. How naive.
Well, speaking of high culture, last time you taught us the word maison, and I'd only seen your written approximation from it, and I couldn't find it, so I spent some time looking it up, and I found out that it's French, and it was so good that I forgot to do bad at English last time. So you did bad at French last time, and you taught us the word maison, which is spelled M-I-S-E-E-N-S-C-E-N-E, and it is the stage design and arrangement of actors and scenes for a theater or a film production for, setting the environment and the feel of the production.
Yeah, and this is the only reason I like this word so much, and I took it from, again, I didn't take this class. My wife took this class, and that was one word I learned from her taking a class that I loved so much because it captures this very large and complex idea.
Yeah. Just a nice, good economy way to. And we have a lot of French phrases we use for that exact same reason, like caveat emptor, or is that Latin?
That's Latin.
Or carpe diem.
Also Latin.
Speaking of clueless.
Also Latin. Seize the day.
Are they?
Yep.
Are they fossil? I mean, did they use those terms in French now?
Is French a Romance language in the first place?
Oh boy, I've waded. I'm drowning now. I'm waded into water that I'm not familiar with. Sorry.
Oh,
Let's
buddy.
go back to English.
I had 2 years of an English teacher in high school that tried her best to beat Latin into my skull, and so I actually have a pretty decent working knowledge of Latin, if anybody can be said to have a working knowledge of a dead language in the first place. One of my favorite Latin phrases is ad nauseum. I like to use that every once in a while, and ad nauseum means it just goes on so much that you get sick. And so if somebody keeps talking, they are talking ad nauseum.
All right, those are both Latin.
That's Wes.
I don't know what I'm talking about. I swear we have some French ones, but the ones I thought of off the top of my head were both Latin and not French.
Is déjà vu not French?
Yeah, great one. There, thank you. You saved me. Good thing I have a co-host. All right. Well, let's go to bad at English for this time.
That's Josh 1, Ben 0, everyone.
You said something that made me think of a phrase that they used to use in the UK, and the phrase is "what it says on the tin," and that's one that, like, if you hadn't heard it before, you don't have to ask anyone to define for you, because in context it makes a lot of sense. It's just a phrase they use in place of kind of the meaning of, like, it's straightforward,
just as advertised.
Yeah, as advertised, we might say in the U.S. And they use the phrase, what it says on the tin. And in my mind, I thought maybe that comes from, like, I don't know, back in the 30s or 40s, before, like, mass production of things, like cardboard boxes for cereal or stuff, and everything came in tins, and you would read on the tin what it said, and then hopefully it did whatever it was it said on the tin, instead of, like, lying to you about it being the best thing ever or whatever. So I did some research, and that was not it at all. This phrase, what it says on the tin, goes back to, like, 1997 was the earliest it was, and it was the Sherwin-Williams company owns a subsidiary in Europe, and they did a series of television advertisements that used this phrase, where they were selling you stain. This is why I thought of you when I found this one. They were selling you stain for, like, staining wood, and they were saying that it does what it says on the tin. So apparently the paint industry was suffering from a lack of trust by the consumers, that they were selling you stain and that it didn't work the way that it said it did. So they were assuring you that their product was reliable and honest.
By saying, no, we promise it'll do the things that we are telling you that it will do.
Yeah, so this became enough of the British zeitgeist that it became part of their vocabulary for saying, as we might say, this does as advertised.
Interesting. Sherwin-Williams in 1997.
Yeah.
Usually your bad at English phrases go back to, the first use of this was at an insane asylum in 1607.
I thought that would be the case here, and it wasn't. It went back to Sherwin-Williams in 97.
Our language is such interesting and, at the same time, utterly random things.
Maybe we'll have to think of some that we have that, like, were, commercials that then became part of the public knowledge, like the Wendy's commercial back in the 90s that used to say, "Where's the beef?"
Okay. Like, I swear, I'm not saying this just for the podcast, but that is the exact first phrase that came into my head when you said that.
But we that phrase came out in that commercial, and now we use it completely independent of that. It just became part of our collective vocabulary to have the meaning of, like, put up or shut up, like, where's the beef?
Interesting. Well, I live in a different kind of nerdy subculture, so a lot of times we'll say, using that same idea, we say screenshot or it didn't happen. I think my wife does that to me sometimes. She says that to me.
Yeah, well, I guess if you're some, like, hotshot ad exec, this is what you always want. You want to sell out of onions because of some press conference, and you want to introduce some phrase in one of your commercials that becomes part of the public vocabulary.
Hopefully you get recognized for that, and your superiors don't take credit, and you get washed under the boards or whatever.
You'll know you've made it when you've been mentioned on the Bad at Magic podcast.
That is it. That's the line. You are not famous until we talk about you.
All right, you sent me a graphic this week that was kind of an extension of our discussion we had last time about the trolley problem.
Was that me? Did I send that to you?
Maybe one of our listeners posted it on the subreddit.
Yeah, there it is. I saw it on the Reddit, and I realized it was in our subreddit. How appropriate.
Yeah, it was something I'd heard before, but then they transformed it a little, or gotten it from someone else who transformed it a little, where they basically took what it was and expressed it in the terms of the shopping cart problem, and it gave it, the trolley problem, and it gave a new light. They called it the shopping cart problem.
I love this because it's such a great intersection of human behavior. And this post, wherever it came from originally, is genius. And the hypothesis that it puts forward is that you can judge a person's moral character completely and utterly by their treatment of a shopping cart once they are done using it at the grocery store.
Yeah. I mean, if there were a spectrum of what you can do, it's all over the place.
Well, it's the perfect epitome of there are things that you're supposed to do, but there's nobody watching, and nobody cares if you don't do it.
Right. So this prompted you and I to create an infographic, which I started and you perfected, that is like a D&D style alignment chart for good, neutral, and evil, and what's the other axis?
Lawful and chaotic.
Lawful, neutral, and chaotic for what behaviors you exhibit when you are finished with your shopping cart. But go ahead.
No, I was just going to wax prolifically about the shopping cart problem again, because this, like, I interacted with this yesterday and watching people screw around with shopping carts, and this is a great way to judge people. If you want to judge somebody, don't judge them on their religious beliefs. Don't judge them based on their purchases or the type of lifestyle that they surround themselves with. Follow them to the grocery store and see what they do with that shopping cart when they're done.
Yeah, so I'm going to quote from the article here that was in that screenshot our listener put up. I don't know, it looks like it's from 4chan or something. I don't recognize this like puce background, but it says, therefore, the shopping cart presents itself as the apex example of whether a person will do what is right without being forced to do it. And so next to that, someone put a little screenshot of the classic trolley cart problem, where you have the trolley going and what it's going to do if you don't interfere in the system at all, and then you standing next to the lever and interfering. And in this case, the interference would be actually returning the cart to the corral that's provided by the retailer.
So before we can go any further, for people that don't do grocery shopping, like there's a cart, you push it, and in the parking lot, there's typically like corrals. They'll take one of the parking spots and put like little border fences on it with a big sign, return carts here. The idea being that, you know, if the consumers put in the tiniest modicum of effort, it saves a ton of work for the people that have to actually take these carts and bring them back into the store. So
wait. Okay. I got to know who in your mind did you just imagine is a listener of this podcast that you needed to explain that to?
People that live in the UK.
They do it too. I can't.
People that live in big cities that don't do large shopping trips. They just have the little. You've seen all those TV shows.
Josh,
from New York.
This is a Venn diagram where the circles don't overlap.
No. I'm putting my.
There
foot
are
down.
no people that listen to the Bad at Magic podcast that also don't know what a shopping cart corral is.
Okay, well, I am going to believe Hollywood on this one. And the lie that Hollywood has told me about people that live in very, very dense large cities like New York is they don't do large-scale shopping to the point where they need carts. They do daily shopping where they have a little basket that they can carry in their arms, and they fill that up every time they go to the store. All right.
I am dying of curiosity on this one. If you are a listener of the Bad at Magic podcast and you needed Josh to explain to you what a shopping cart corral is, please go on the open thread for this subreddit for episode 35 and explain to us that you needed someone to explain it to you. Okay, now go ahead.
Honestly, I was going to chip in. Like, my score is so much higher than Ben's right now over the last couple episodes. Please do pitch in. I need a win
here, people.
Yeah, Ben needs the win. So, like, pipe it. Like, get back to us on this one. No, before we go any farther, we have to know before we evaluate it, before we put good and evil labels on the behaviors of the shopping cart. What is it, Ben Rich, that you do with the shopping cart when you're done with it?
Okay, well, you characterize the work that's required as the lowest modicum of effort, I think, or something like that you said just a second ago. I think there's a spectrum of effort. Sometimes just through the whatever, you get to the store and the parking lot's really packed and you have to park way in the far part of the parking lot. There could be a time where you're like, half a mile from one of those cart corrals, and the level of effort that's being required of you is higher. Maybe it's raining. Maybe you got a crying kid in the car that needs to go home and take a nap. And all of a sudden, what you think is just the lowest modicum of effort is actually kind of a big deal what you're being asked for.
This sounds like an elaborate justification for sometimes you do, sometimes you don't.
Okay. You asked me what I do with the shopping cart.
Yes.
I always put the shopping cart back. Always.
Always. Okay, good.
Always.
That's what I was after.
Okay, but I want you to understand that when I say always, that includes when the kid is crying and when it's raining and when I'm really far away from a thing. And even, or if there isn't a corral at all and the only option is to take it all the way back in the store, I always do it.
Now, do you take just yours, or do you, if there happens to be a stray on your way back?
This Sunday, I went for a walk. I walked 6 miles. I altered my routes that on the way back, I passed 2 shopping carts that were randomly out in the middle of a neighborhood, literally a mile from the store, but I could tell by the branding on the shopping cart what store they were from, so that on my way back, I picked up those same 2 shopping carts and took them back to the store they came from.
All right, so all right, if anybody that works at the Vatican is listening, I would like to propose Ben Rich for sainthood, based solely on the fact that he randomly returned a shopping cart like from miles away.
But the thing about this is it's like picking up litter. If everyone just picks up a little bit of litter, then the world's a better place.
There's a difference between picking up a candy bar wrapper and pushing a 40-pound cart more than a mile.
Yeah, but you know what? I was out in the neighborhood. I didn't have anything better to do, and frankly, it kind of bugs me to see shopping carts. Okay, so there's this story that's of dispute in criminology circles, where basically some governor back in the 80s, when the murder rate was really high in New York, came in, or mayor in New York City.
Rudy Giuliani, the broken windows concept.
Yeah, that. But the first thing he did is he had him clean all the graffiti off the sides of the subway cars. And they saw that clearing graffiti off of the subway cars caused a corresponding decrease in violent crime. But graffiti is just graffiti. It's just paint on the side of a train. Like, how is that connected to violent crime? And like a shopping cart in the middle of your neighborhood, it just makes the neighborhood feel like dumpy. Like, I don't want to live in a dumpy neighborhood where people leave shopping carts laying around.
You don't live in that neighborhood. You are literally visiting that state, walking through that neighborhood, and you decided to put in what I would consider not a modicum of effort, but a tremendous amount of effort to improve the lives of complete and utter strangers for no other reason than it's just making the world a better place.
Yes. And I just wrote yes.
Sainthood, sainthood, people, right here.
No, it's not a spectrum like that. It's just that I make the world where I live better, and I don't have a minimum threshold. Like, I don't be like, oh, I'm only visiting here, so I'm not going to pick up that piece of litter. Even when I'm visiting, I want the place to be better.
That's insane. That is an insane amount of effort. Like, okay, you're off the charts as far as the cart return goes.
Okay, but at the other end of the spectrum, you parked your car right next to one of the corrals, you get done shopping, and you just push it 10 feet to go into the corral, and it maybe takes you an extra 10 seconds.
You're talking about still on the good spectrum, because if you're talking about the complete opposite end of what you're talking about, like you park next to the corral, finish shopping, then take the cart and put it in the back of your truck, strip it for parts, and then sell it for a profit.
Yeah, but I'm also kind of making the point that there would be a situation where not putting it in the corral would require more effort.
Okay. Not putting it in the corral require more effort than just leaving it next to your car?
You can't just crash into it with your car.
Oh, you can.
So okay, but you need to move it out of the way, and if you're right next to the corral, moving it out of the way, just put it in the corral.
So, you're right. Yeah, that's probably the minimum threshold where actually, you know what? I can take that back. The minimum effort is if you're parked next to the corral is if you put it on the other side of your car and you're unloading the groceries from the cart into your car on that side in the empty space, and then you just leave it there and then drive off.
Yeah. Right. No one's going to make you do that. Like, if there were a cop standing there watching you not put your grocery cart back, have you committed a crime? Maybe somewhere in America that's a crime. I wouldn't doubt it, but I'm guessing it's not. Like, you don't sign a contract. There's no legal agreement. It's not your property. There's nothing making you put the cart back. We just have it's like abiding line behavior. We just have a societal agreement that the world's a better place if you put your shopping cart back in the corral.
So I'll tell you, I'm in the same realm, but I'm at a different end of it than you are.
All right. So what do you do?
So I also always return the cart to the corral. And not only that, but if there are strays on my way, I rarely go out of my way. I did go out of my way today, but I'll grab extras if there's one or two.
Was it because you've been thinking about this?
Not really. Because here's the thing, and this is why I'm in the same area, but on the other side of it from you. Is I'm going to put a huge asterisk on this. There's 2 footnotes I have. First of all, I am super judgmental about it the whole time. Like whenever I pick up a stray, I'm almost...
You want to dust it for prints.
Oh, I'm audible in my what kind of a lazy, terrible human being wouldn't walk the extra 10 feet to put this away? I am so much better than these terrible humans.
I just think, look at this nice thing I'm doing to help out society. I don't think about the person that left it there.
Well, and here's the other thing is, so I don't own shopping carts, right? And these things are very ruggedized because they realize, I guess the manufacturers of shopping carts know that they have to have a long life.
I believe they're pretty expensive too.
I believe that because usually they're very well built. And because they are so well built, I am constantly testing the limits of the structural engineering of shopping carts, if that makes any sense.
According to Google, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $700 each. That's a significant investment for a retailer.
That is for shopping carts. So I should feel bad for doing all of the terrible things I do to shopping carts. For example, I like to ride the cart from the store to my car. I don't know if you've ever done that, where you get it going really fast.
Why does that cause extra damage to the cart? It doesn't.
Because I weigh a lot, Ben, and those casters are not rated for a guy my size.
They get way more damage from picking up women's hair on the floor and getting wrapped around the axles.
All right, second of all, they are very rugged, and I get a sense of have you ever Hulk smashed something? And you just walk away from it grunting and you just feel good.
Yes.
Okay, so I like to Hulk smash my carts into the corral. There's that thing where there's a long line of the carts, and not all of them are all the way compacted into the cart in front of it. And so you're
I still think the 2 things you just said are completely negligible, but go ahead.
I'm not done. It's there's 20 carts, not all of them are pushed together. I'll bet I could compact this entire accordion of shopping carts with one giant effort. Ready? Bam! Next, there's also the idea where if there's no cars and the corral is empty and it's way over there, maybe I'll try
to push it and see if you can get a hole in.
Oh yeah. From awesome. 10 spaces, just doing that thing where you lean in to try to make it turn.
I do half of those things. I like that we gamify our lives like this. Shopping carts are like this outlet of fun.
Oh, there was one time I do feel a little bit bad about this in retrospect, but I was having a rough day and this parking lot was full, and the only spot that I could park in had a cart that was popped up on the curb where the planter was of the tree. And so you couldn't park your car in the spot because the shopping cart was sticking out just enough to kind of block it. And so I parked my car halfway out of the spot and left it running. And I got the cart and I lifted it up over my head and I threw it into the corral. Whoa. And I felt a little bad about that in retrospect. I did go back to check and see if the cart was broken. But,
the damage that you're talking about that you may or may not have done by doing some of those things, it doesn't accumulate in excess of the lifespan of the cart.
I don't know, Ben. I've broken other things that I thought were rated for my weight class.
All right. Well, okay, so all of that is supposed to be external evidence of your role in society. Are you chaotic, or are you lawful, or are you good, or are you evil? And then also, what length are you willing to go to do those things? Like, you can really go out of your way to be more evil with a shopping cart, and you can really go out of your way to be more good with a shopping cart. So we put all of this into a D&D style alignment chart. Instead of describing it to you, I'll just tell you that I'm going to put it up on the Facebook page. Every time we do an episode, I make a collection of graphics about the things that we talked about. I put it up in an album on our Bad at Magic Facebook page. So if you haven't, please go like our Facebook page and follow along, when you're listening, and you can see some of the things that we talked about, and that's where our Bad at Magic shopping cart theory infographic alignment chart will be.
I'm going to tack onto this. First of all, Ben does great graphics for all the episodes. You should go see our Facebook page. It's great. Second, I personally want to hear what other people do with these shopping carts, because when we were going back and forth with this alignment, the thing that the one sticking point in my head, what really separates people, is where the cart ends up. If you take the time to put it in the corral, you're probably good. If you just leave it where it is, you're probably neutral. If you actively put it in the worst spots that you can think of to screw other people over, you're probably evil. So
Okay, what do you think of people that pop two wheels up over the curb into the planter? Do you think that's evil?
That's
because I think the idea there is so that it won't, if a wind picks up, it won't blow into someone's car, but they don't want to put the effort into taking it to the corral.
I don't think they're evil. I think they're lazy. And I think that falls into the neutral spectrum.
Okay.
But I want to hear what people do with their carts, because this genuinely interests me as a litmus test for morality.
People weigh in on either the subreddit or the Facebook page and let us know what you do with your shopping carts, whether you are neutral or chaotic or lawful or good or evil.
We promise we probably won't call you out as bad or good people on the podcast.
So I was wondering what other things, it's easy to understand with shopping carts because it's just a very clean vignette that happens in our daily lives. But what are some other things in life that are like this? That you don't have to do it one way, but whether or not you do is an indicator of your regard for people. Like for instance, if you're in the drive-through and they ask you to pull forward to wait for your food, do you do it or
not?
Nope.
Every time, flat no, don't do it. Actually, okay. I have a good one of these. But it sounds like
go ahead.
All right.
Yeah, you go first.
All right, mine is also grocery store related, and it's very close to it hits very close to home because I experienced this to my detriment yesterday. Yesterday was Friday, and I was off of work. I took the day off. They were doing server upgrades. Well, it doesn't matter. I was off on Friday, and so I decided, I'm going to knock out the grocery shopping for the week in the middle of the day, because normally I do it in the evening after I get off of work, and it's flooded with people that are just trying to get their groceries and go home. And I thought, everybody's going to be working. Nobody's going to be at the grocery store. It's going to be great. I'm going to have the whole place to myself. Ben, I was so wrong. I was so wrong. The grocery store was just as full, but it was full of retirees who it was clear this was the only thing that they're going to do today. Nobody was in a hurry, and nobody gave any kind of crap about where they were placed, if they were blocking aisles for people. It was the worst shopping experience I have experienced, hands down. It was just,
wow.
I was looking at, when I'm in the grocery store, I'm constantly making sure that my cart is not blocking any aisles and that I am physically not impeding traffic.
We've talked about this before.
Yes.
And if you have children with you, you have to teach them also, because they'll naturally want to impede traffic and bump into people.
Exactly. And I'm a large person, so the threshold for me impeding traffic is very low. I have to be very conscious. But I
assume the degree of consciousness you have for that also makes you kind of impatient with other people that don't show that same degree of consciousness about it.
Ben, not once, not twice, but 3 times. 3 times in the grocery store. It's not that I was cut off. It's not that somebody walked in front of me and then stopped and stood while I was trying to get a thing that I was looking at across the aisle. I was completely blocked in to the point where I could not physically move anywhere until this person got out of my way.
3 times this happened to you? That's a lot.
3 times.
Okay, did you do the same thing each time, or was it cumulative and you had an outburst the 3rd time?
No.
Okay, so I'm imagining you. You're standing there, you're kind of looking around exasperated, like you're expecting them to look at you and realize they blocked you in and go, oh, I'm so sorry, I can't believe I did that. But I'm guessing that didn't happen any of the 3 times.
It did not happen any of the 3 times.
Did you clear your throat? Did you say, excuse me, can I get by? Like, what did you do?
I did the thing that I always do, where I was super mad about it internally, and then I didn't do a single thing or utter a syllable to the person at the time.
Yeah,
and they're all these, and it's much. I feel like it's more difficult when it's.
Do you bear emotional wounds the following day still?
Yeah, I'm still traumatized. There was like one of those in aisle displays to my left and my cart to my right, and I was all the way to the side, and I was looking across the aisle at some baking goods, and a lady, this nice little old lady, pulls her cart and stops her cart right in front of where I'm standing, and then starts looking at the same stuff for the same amount of time. And I was completely stuck. I was just like, well, I guess I live here now. And I'm not going to yell at this old lady. Like, that's not nice.
So I can't tell you how many times it happened to me because I don't count. But it does happen to me, and I'll tell you what I do. I don't want to confront the people because I don't want to make them feel bad. And I also think, am I really in that much of a hurry? I guess I'm not. So what I'll do is I'll pretend that I'm interested in something around me so that it looks like I'm not stuck, so that if they notice me, they don't go, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
You see, that's the difference between you and me, because I want that to happen. I want so desperately for that person to turn to me and be mortified, like, oh my goodness, I've been in your way this whole time.
But I've had that happen before, and I hate it. When I get stuck and then they turn to me and realize that they blocked me in and they get all mortified like that, I just think, oh, that was awkward. I wish that didn't happen. Next time I'll try to avoid that interaction.
Again, this is why you're the better person. Because when that happens to me,
these are not...
I feel so good. Like they go, oh, I'm sorry, I've been blocking you this whole time. Like, yeah, you have been. Now get out of the way.
But that's not what you say. What do you actually say?
Like, oh, it's no problem. But
yeah, exactly.
The cherry on top of this cake, Ben, and now I'm just ranting about the grocery store. Like, I don't even know what we're talking about. I'm ranting about the grocery store trip.
We're talking about shopping cart theory.
I was in the checkout aisle, and we were checking out, and there was this old lady again in front of me checking out, with putting her stuff on the cart on the conveyor belt and getting wrung out and paying. After she had paid, after all of the groceries had been bagged and all of them were in her cart, she then proceeded to have a 3-minute conversation with the checkout person, as the conveyor belt is completely full of my stuff, and I'm just standing there like, what am I supposed to do in that situation?
Come on, it wasn't 3 minutes.
It was 3 full minutes because I timed it. I was that pissed off at this point. Like,
what? It was actually 3
minutes? 3
full
minutes, like to the point where I was formulating the sentences in my head. Like, what can I say that's really passive aggressive but doesn't make me sound like a complete tool?
You know what's really astonishing in my mind is if you had just given me some hypothetical scenario where you're standing in line behind someone and they're just having an unrelated conversation that's causing you to wait, and you'd ask me what I thought your time threshold was before you would interrupt, I would definitely not have said 3 minutes. I would have said maybe like 65 seconds.
You see, and this is the problem, is I like to put on this mask that like I'm this cold, emotionless, heartless person, but in the wild, by myself, I'm just a coward.
Okay, but how high is it then? I wonder if we could do this like a social experiment. Like, if it's not 3 minutes, how high does it go?
Ben, if you start following me around and setting up scenarios where I have to wait for stuff, I might murder you. Like, don't do this.
So I saw this great example of this. I'll put a link to it if I can find it on YouTube, where they did this study where the participants thought that their study was that they were going to go into this room and take a test, and that the study was the test. But what they did is they set up this little vignette in the hallway where someone was blocking their way by pretending to look through a filing cabinet for files.
Oh, geez. And just to see how long they would wait or what they would do?
Yes. And the way that they interacted with that person in the hallway influenced what they did once they got into the room.
Okay.
Like if they were aggressive and challenged them, then they did aggressive and challenging things once they got into the room. And if they were polite and unobtrusive, it also influenced it. Anyway.
So if they were a polite person, they were more likely to be polite in other circumstances? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. It just bumping into someone in the hallway made them aggressive when they got to the room to do the study.
Don't do this to me. Like I will have a mental breakdown if I have another experience like that.
Just when you start feeling like that inside, think, this is a person, a stranger. Why should I let them affect my day? Why should I, be upset because of what they're doing? They're not thinking about me.
That's the problem. Everybody should be thinking about me all the time, Ben. That's how this works.
Okay, well, I thought I was good at this, but I was talking to my wife that we were going to have this discussion about this, and she gave me an example of one I haven't even considered. Probably one we're all doing right now. So it's coming up on the holiday season. We're doing our Christmas shopping. I assume because of COVID, if you weren't already, because it's the year 2020, you've done some shopping online. Well, when you have more than one item in your cart on an online shopping store, say for instance Amazon.com, there's a little checkbox that says group my items into as few shipments as possible.
Yes, I experienced that today.
What is your calculation for what the purpose of using that box or not using it is?
That is saving Amazon money by using less packing material. But I guess it's also a green thing. Like if you're packing, like you're going to have to wait longer, obviously, if you're going to consolidate.
So there's a potential environmental impact,
yes.
But you think it comes at a cost of waiting longer. It's also whatever threshold it sets for them as a business. It isn't significant enough for the consideration that there's any monetary value attached to checking that box or not checking that box.
What do you mean by that?
It doesn't increase your shipping costs.
Okay.
To check it,
Yeah.
to uncheck
It's just
it. Like they don't give you a discount for checking it.
Yes. So Amazon is still giving you the opportunity to get all of your stuff when you expect it, which is as fast as possible. But they're also giving you the opportunity to basically save them money for no reason.
Okay. Or like you said, maybe to you it represents some type of impact to the environment.
We have way too many Amazon boxes at my house as it is. So yeah, if we can get, if there's no time constraint for me to receive this stuff, I know there's another one. There's a box on there where if you really don't care when it shows up, like they'll ship it a week or two later, and then you get like $1 on their digital services or something.
Oh, okay.
My wife.
So they actually are paying you to
wait.
My
wife has done that from time to time. I know that we've rented at least 2 movies on Amazon Prime, basically for free because we didn't care when stuff got shipped to us.
So when I was discussing this with my wife, she expressed it in terms of impact to human beings. Like she's imagining someone in the warehouse filling your order or the delivery driver coming to your house and how it would require an extra trip and take more of their time and make them busier. Just like if everyone picked up a piece of litter, would there be any litter left? Well, if everyone checked the group my shipments into as few boxes as possible, would UPS drivers get to go home an hour early?
Probably not. Well, let's see, but still, it's the same tonnage is getting shipped. It's just being shipped in larger and therefore slightly heavier packages, which then take up more volume.
So let's say I order 4 items, and for whatever reason they're ready on 4 separate days. So either the box waits till the 4th day when everything's there. I don't know how they figured that out in the computer. Put it all in one box and send it to me. Or a package gets shipped on Monday, a package gets shipped on Tuesday, a Wednesday, and Thursday. That's 4 trips by the driver to your house, which has got to, I don't know, maybe it's just so efficient that it's negligible, and that's why there's no monetary cost associated with it.
That's why,
like you said.
I think that's why it exists, is because it's all upside for Amazon. Like they are prepared and they've built their costs and their whole logistics system on the idea that every single item that is ordered from there, in the worst case scenario, you imagine you have to plan for that. Every item that gets sold out of this warehouse is going to go into an individual package to be shipped. And if it doesn't, that's just gravy.
Well, I don't know. Maybe like you said, because of the tonnage of it, that is it necessarily even increased packaging? Maybe if you send out the 4 items in 4 separate packages, each one's more efficient than the totality if you put all 4 in one box. Maybe it's just a wash.
Man, this is like the most interesting and boring topic at the same time. Like I could talk to you about this for an hour straight and nobody would want to hear it.
Well, okay, here's the bottom line of what I think. I think either way, we've recognized that a multi-billion-dollar corporation has decided that it doesn't matter. And so what it really does, and I think the most valuable lesson to learn here, is it lets both people feel good about themselves. If you're the kind of person that wants to feel like you're doing something good for the environment and checking this box makes you feel good about yourself, you can have that. And if you're the kind of person that's impatient and you think I want this as fast as possible, you can have it too.
That's a positive externality, Ben.
Yeah.
Huh.
And it doesn't cost them any. Either way, they get to make both groups happy and sell you stuff.
Okay, I can't help it now, because legitimately, I am fascinated by this topic. The logistics of large-scale mass shipping are so interesting to me, but I'm sure nobody else cares. But now I'm curious about another thing. Is there another topic that is just as boring and interesting at the same time? Like we need to. This is space I think we could live and explore forever. The interesting but boring stuff.
All right. Well, speaking of interesting but boring stuff, it's been a while since we've done a book review. So let's invite the audience to participate. And I think it's time for a fiction book. You encouraged me to read The Count of Monte Cristo. And when I picked it up and realized that it's like 1,000 pages, I was like, oh my gosh. But it has been so completely gripping. Like, I'm riveted by this thing. I can barely put it down, but I can't read 50 hours worth of reading in one go. So I've been binging it. It's fantastic. It was written in the mid 19th century, and it's as gripping as if it were written yesterday.
So I read this. I was forced to read this in high school. So it's been a long time since I've actually read it. Is this the book that you're proposing we read for the review?
No, it's too long, and yeah.
All right, listeners, everybody listen to The Count of Monte Cristo and write a 5-page paper on what you thought about Edmond Dantes.
I want to tell you, thank you for recommending it, because I've absolutely been enjoying it. And so anyone who says I hate fiction is wrong. I enjoy good fiction, and this is good fiction. It's incredible. I'm absolutely loving it.
You just brought tears to English teachers' eyes across the world.
Okay, I've been pondering the kind of timelessness of the tale of this elaborate, concoction of this man being convicted for a crime he didn't commit and suffering and then seeking recompense. I was thinking of how it's similar to the tale of Joseph in Egypt in the Old Testament, and then this tale of Edmond Dantes in the 19th century, and then maybe more contemporarily the tale of Andy Dufresne in The Shawshank Redemption.
There is no news stories. I don't know if we've talked about this before. Everything is a remix, and this is why these stories resonate through time, is because everybody...
Yeah, it's compelling. We want to hear another retelling of this story.
Everybody has felt that the injustice of the universe coming down on them for no reason, and they've wanted that sweet, sweet revenge, and that's what this story is all about.
Well, that's where I found a bit of contrast between the story of The Count of Monte Cristo and The Shawshank Redemption. Andy Dufresne and Edward Dantes both were convicted for a crime they didn't commit and spent, more than a decade in prison. Andy Dufresne decided to take it to just as a referendum on the mistakes he'd made in his life, and then forgive people and get on with his life.
Which is probably the more mature thing to do.
Edward Dantes kind of did the opposite. He decided to...
He burned that thing to the ground, didn't he?
Yeah.
It was so perfect in so many subtle ways. Like, that was clearly his sole focus of a very smart person for a long time.
It's a riveting tale, and I thought when it was that long, I thought there's going to be broad swaths of it that are just drivel and tedious, and I haven't come across one yet. Well...
take all that with a grain of salt, because authors back in that day were literally paid per word. English teachers, if you are crying for joy based on Ben's recommendation, I'm going to bring you back down to earth. Like 19th century Victorian English literature. We do have an
English teacher that's one of our listeners.
Victorian age literature is, for the most part, ridiculously bad. And I don't know why English teachers are so hard up on, you've got to read these classics. They're not classics. They're just stories that get told over and over. But in that specific era, authors were incentivized to write as prolifically as possible.
I'm having a renaissance in my life where I realize that I am now doing voluntarily things they wanted me to do when I was 17 that I absolutely did not want to do back then.
Yeah, you shouldn't go to high school until you're 30 and you have some, actually appreciate some of the things you're learning.
What did they expect back then? Was I just going to overcome all of my reluctance and distaste for those kinds of things and learn something wonderful in spite of myself? But now I'm learning it because I want to.
Ben, I think you have stumbled upon something that could revolutionize society across the board. I think think of all the menial jobs that everybody hates. All of the hard labor, all of the fast food, the menial, minimum wage jobs that you can think of. I think children, let's say 8 and up, need to work these jobs until they get an appreciation for what it's like having to live a real life. And say somewhere in their mid-20s, then they go to high school and they get to actually learn some stuff, learn to read and do math and stuff.
Yeah.
Man, I really appreciate these math lessons. now that I'm not required to make change 17 times.
Yeah, it's one of the most common memes on the internet. Is like, and then I realized I still don't need to know math.
All right, so I'm an accountant, so that has never applied. I have needed to know math my whole life.
Me either. I love math.
I tell my son this on a regular enough basis that he parrots it back to me. Math can explain everything in the universe. And whenever he says, like, oh, how does math explain this? And I tell him, it blows his mind every time.
It touches my heart that I have a good friend that teaches that to their children. I don't think I've ever said that to my kids, but I should. All right, so what I'd like to do, because we're recording this 2 weeks before Christmas, is we'll give people until we record the next episode. So I'll open a thread for this on Reddit and on Facebook for people to nominate our next book review that we'll do in mid-January. So between now and the next episode, if you're listening to this, you want some input on what our next book review is, knock yourself out. We've knocked around some titles, but let's constrain it to fiction, maybe something recent, anything. We'll be open to your feedback until we record on the 26th of December.
And honestly, it's great to open it up for listeners like this, because if they recommend a book and it turns out to be awful, well, neither one of us is to blame.
Right, their fault.
Yeah. It's like, oh, this listener's opinions are terrible.
Or we've done that with Christmas movies. We'll find out.
Well,
I'm not looking forward to watching The Nightmare Before Christmas.
Which blows my mind. That's a classic. I don't understand how you haven't seen The Nightmare Before Christmas up to this point.
Yeah, so is, I don't know, Silas Marner, but apparently it's miserable literature.
Well, that I've never heard of, so...
It's funny, Silas, you will have heard of it, and there's a connection to Christmas stories. In A Christmas Story, the one with Peter Billingsley and, as Ralphie who wants the Red Ryder BB gun, there's a scene where his teacher's in the classroom talking to her fourth graders, or fifth grade, I don't know what grade they're in, and she's like, class, open to page 47 in Silas Marner. That's like college level reading. I think it was a joke, just a throwaway joke that's in there.
That is remarkable that you have that off the top of your head. But then again, we established last episode that you read random books based on them being mentioned in movies.
Yeah, that's weird. That's happened 2 episodes in a row.
Is this a thing in your life? Is there other books from movies
I didn't think it was a thing. But I'm going to be more conscious of it now. But yeah, they do mention the book Silas Marner in the film Christmas Story.
You're such a good person, it disgusts me. You're watching a movie and you're like, oh, there's a book in this movie. I should read that book and be a better person.
I also read the books of the movies, and you and I just talked about the fact that one of the ones that we saw recently... Oh, you didn't read that book. Maybe that'll be one of our nominations.
Yeah, we were talking specifically about Ready Player One, because Ben was talking about reading Ready Player 2, but I have not read Ready Player One. I have watched Ready Player One, and I thought it was a very tweeny movie.
Yeah, and the book wasn't. All right, so that brings us to the end of our planned content. We're grateful to our listeners if you've made it this far. Hopefully you're listening to this before Christmas. If you're not, thanks for listening at some other point in time. If not, have a happy Christmas. And next time we get together, we'll talk about the magic system in some of our favorite Christmas movies.
If you love what we do, recommend us to a friend. If you can't get enough of the show, please consider becoming one of our supporters on Patreon. And like Ben said, happy holidays.